So hello everyone, and thank you for joining our second Women Think Next event. A very warm Microsoft welcome to those joining from other companies. And of course, it's lovely to see so many of our Microsoft colleagues also on the call today. My name is Tracy Martin, and I'm a Senior Commercial Manager within our EMEA Digital Sales organisation. And I also lead our Women at Microsoft in Ireland Employee Resource Group. I've worked at Microsoft, gosh, for the last 26 years. And on my last count, I've had 15 roles across 8 different business groups. And I can honestly say it has been an amazing journey. But in particular, over the last 7 years with our current CEO, Satya Nadella, where he's taken us on this journey of cultural and digital transformation, which has been innovative and exciting. I'm also a working mum with 3 teenagers, and for the last 21 months, my in-person office work buddies have been my husband and our puppy. And probably my saving grace during this time has been walking said puppy and playing golf poorly with said husband. But look, for the next hour, I will be your host, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Helena Dillon, Emer Michaels, and Liana Tomescu, for a discussion on the pathway to effective hybrid working. Now, I'm going to preface it by saying we do not claim to be experts, but what we would like to do today is share our experiences at Microsoft of working and connecting virtually over the last 21 months. We'll look at what it's felt like in terms of team collaboration, maintaining a sense of community, and continuing to nurture that culture of learning and career development. But also with an optimistic eye on the future, we want to share with you some of the learnings that we aspire to take forward into the hybrid work environment. But we do want to hear from you. So please use the Teams chat window throughout the conversation today. Share your thoughts, your comments, and your questions. And I'm going to try to leave a good bit of time at the end for Q&A from our audience. So we have 2 moderators today, Chloe Leonard and Alina Simonova, who will keep us honest and ensure we get through as many of those questions as possible. We do have a very diverse workforce here at Microsoft in Ireland. We have almost 3,000 employees spanning across 81 different nationalities and working across many business functions, from engineering to sales to finance. And that's naming just a few, right? But as part of that, and because of that diversity, fostering a culture of diversity and inclusion is really critical for us and is key to, I suppose, a healthy work environment. We're very passionate about ensuring that both in terms of physical, virtual, and hybrid workplace, people are given the opportunity to really be their authentic selves and to feel included. And our mantra in that regard is, come as you are and do what you love. So all of that gives you a little bit of a sense of what we're about before we start today's conversation. But look, Helena, Emer, and Liana, I've had the privilege of knowing each of you through various shared experience here at Microsoft over the years. Before we get stuck into the discussion around hybrid work and culture, can I ask you to introduce yourselves to our audience today? And Helena, I'm going to start with you.
Cool. Thank you, Tracy. Well, my name is Helena Dillon, and I'm delighted to be here today. And thanks to everyone that's joining us this lunchtime. A little bit about me. I'm a full-time working mum of 2 sports mad boys. So if you want to talk GA, soccer, rugby, or even golf for that matter, let me know. I have to be fluent in all sports. From a work perspective, I started at Microsoft back in 2000. So I've worked across support, engineering, program management, sales. I've worked with multiple products and services that you might be familiar with, like Visio, Office, Azure, and Dynamics. My roles have been always EMEA-wide or global roles, which is part of the beauty of Microsoft. Working across multiple geographies really allows you to meet new people from all around the world. My current role is the EMEA corporate sales leader for the Microsoft advertising team. So if you search on Bing or you check out MSN for your regular news updates, you will find the work of my team there. And while spending 21 years at a company might sound completely alien to many of you, when you're at a company where you're always learning and always out of your comfort zone, it really makes a lot of sense. Having worked in at least, I think, 12 different roles at this stage, and 4 different functions and many different managers, some more than once, I can genuinely say that the really exciting thing about working in Microsoft is that your next job just might not exist yet with the way technology changes here all the time.
Gosh, yeah, it's a very, very good observation, Helena. I will move next to Liana. Leanna, why don't you introduce yourself?
Great. Thanks very much, Tracy. So, hi everyone. Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for joining our call. I'm Liana, and I'm originally from Romania, but I moved to Ireland 21 years ago. So, I'm here for a long time, and I love it. And so, I work in cybersecurity in Microsoft, where I help customers to deploy one of our solutions, which is called Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And I never expected to enjoy this area of cybersecurity, but I love it. It's so exciting. So my career journey actually started out when I studied computer science and business in Trinity, and I graduated in 2016. And then during that time, I actually had several summer internships during my degree where I got to experience lots of different working environments. And for me, I chose to come back to Microsoft because I previously had an internship in Microsoft as well, and I chose to come back as a graduate, as a program manager, and because I thought it was just the best place for me to grow my career, and I just adored the environment. It was so much fun. So I worked in the office group for that first year, and then I switched to working in Azure on the Azure Crisis and Reliability Engineering for approximately 4 years. And it was only last year that I switched to cybersecurity, where I am now. And during my time at Microsoft, I've also gotten very involved with other things, such as I've gotten very involved with a group called CWIT, Connecting Women in Technology, which is a women's network made up of Ireland's top technology companies. And Microsoft was actually a founding member of it, by the way, back over 10 years ago. And I lead one of the pillars there, the early careers pillar, which means that I lead a wonderful team of volunteers across lots of different companies who all work on this mission of empowering women to pursue and grow their technology careers. So it's great. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, look, pleasure. And look, it's through our connection at CWIT that we got to know each other. But I'm just going to say to you, as somebody who's not in a technical role, working in cybersecurity sounds really exciting. But look, over to you, Emer. Let me, last but not least.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks. That was a great intro, Liana. My name is Emer Michaels, and I'm a group manager in our Microsoft Business Operations organization. Similar to the girls, I joined Microsoft quite a long time ago, in 2005. So look, over the last 16 years, I've had roles across all of the supply chain functions, where I was involved in planning and launch some products you might be aware of, like Xbox 360, Xbox One, Surface, really anything that you see on the shelf that Microsoft has manufactured. I probably had some role in that. But additional to that, I spent a lot of time in supply chain. But additional to that, I worked in planning and forecasting, category management, business management and strategy. So lots of different experiences. And if I'm honest, that's what's kept me at Microsoft, really. The whole idea of growth mindset culture, where we're encouraged to try new things and to take risks in order to progress your career. So I've never been bored. That's why I'm still here. I'm married to Shane. We have 3 young daughters, all in primary school. So similar to Helena, you'll usually find me on the sidelines of a GAA pitch somewhere in Meath at the weekends.
Wow, thank you, Emer. Well, I can honestly say, as somebody who worked in Xbox as you did, you would have been very popular in our house over the years and still would be. But listen, before we go on, and I'm actually going to just intercept very quickly. I mentioned at the very beginning of this call that we wanted people to drop in questions and comments on the chat window. And of course, this is about being dynamic and thinking on our feet. And unfortunately, we've just discovered that I think there are some challenges with the chat window. However, we do want to hear from you and get your questions. So what you can do today, if you have questions, and we would love to hear from you, is please reply to the invitation you would have received for this event, and put your question in there. And Chloe and Elena are monitoring that inbox, and we'll get through them. And look, if we don't get through them during the session, we'll definitely get back to you. So a little sidebar conversation there, being agile, thinking on our feet. But look, you know what? Thank you for those introductions, ladies. And you know what? I did a little bit of mental maths as you were going through them, and I counted over 70 years of Microsoft experience across the 4 of us, which is a little bit scary, I'm just going to say. But look, let's not worry about the 70 years. Let's think really, I suppose, the last 21 months. And I still take a breath when I say 21 months, because I go, really, has it been that long? but we moved to remote working 21 months ago. Emer, can I start with you? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, God, it sure has been an interesting couple of years. So back in March 2020, the role that I was doing was a business manager role on our Microsoft Ireland leadership team. And I'd been doing that role for a couple of years. And in that role, like, I felt like I needed to be in the office, right? It was an Ireland focused role. Most of my stakeholders were based in Ireland. So my day consisted of meeting people face to face, workshopping, strategizing around a whiteboard. So for me, it was a huge shift to suddenly be at home. I mean, not being able to connect with people the way I used to, things like that. The construct of the team I was part of was kind of like a board of directors sort of construct. So it wasn't the usual team dynamic. So while people around me were all of a sudden having daily team check-ins and Kahoot quizzes and lots of virtual coffees, I didn't have any of that. So I did feel quite isolated. Yeah, it was a very strange first few months after March 2020. I'm naturally quite an independent and positive person. So even admitting to myself that I had these feelings of isolation and challenge, like it took a few weeks, to be honest. It took a few weeks for me to realize it. And then it took even another few weeks for me to kind of talk about it with my manager. But as I reflect on it, I think what made all the difference, and really shaped the journey I went on over the next year or so was a couple of things. I think number one, the support of my manager. In Microsoft, we have a manager framework which kind of defines, what good people management is all about, and it's called Model Coach Care. And she really lived that. Okay, like, she really modeled self-care during this time, which encouraged me to do the same, to get out for the daily walks and do those things that made you have that sense of looking after yourself. When I spoke to her about how I was feeling, she listened. She really stepped in to support me when I was trying to implement some of the new things on the team and the new ways of working. When I needed to take time off for homeschooling, it was never an issue, and realizing as well that she was also dealing with her own challenges in the new dynamic. And then towards the end of towards the end of 2020, I started to think about my next career move. What I was going to do next, and how in the name of God was I going to actually navigate through this in a remote way. And she really invested time coaching me, connecting me with people, like challenging me to think big, and supporting me through the whole process of looking for and transitioning to my current role. I think the other big thing, I kind of touched on it, was self-care, right? So I took up yoga, something I'd been wanting to do for years, but just never had the time to do it. So now I don't have a commute. I live miles away from the office, right? So I always spent a lot of time in the car going across the M50. Didn't have to do that anymore. So I started to do yoga in the mornings, and I'm still doing it now, before the house wakes up, So those two things kind of changed my whole outlook. And honestly, when I look back, really helped me through those days, those dark days, even if we think about last January and around this time of year. But now, as I look forward as a manager, I really think we need to recognize that we really don't know what we don't know about hybrid working. But what we do know is that the focus on people has to be our number one priority. How we communicate, how we connect, how we learn, how we listen, how we model coach care. It's so important.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to start by saying, Emer, look, thank you for sharing so honestly. That sense of isolation you talk about, I'm very sure you're not alone in what you described, and so many of the reports and the learnings that we have, I think, from over the last 21 months. Now we're gathering data and information and feedback from people. You definitely weren't alone in that sense of isolation, but it's a very difficult thing to talk about. I think also the importance of having that manager support, that model coach care approach that you described so nicely from your manager. That's something that definitely resonates for me.
Yeah.
I know you and I have chatted a couple of times. We went on a similar journey over the last year in terms of, you know, exploring career, next steps, what that looked and felt like, and definitely having a supportive manager who really applied and lived that model coach care philosophy was really key, you know.
And I think we've learned that, right? Because if we think about isolation, I mean, I'm in a house with 4 other people, so I wasn't isolated on my own, you know what I mean? But it's that lack of connection with the people that you're used to engaging with on a daily basis, right? And it's a lack of connection with the people who you collaborate with to be successful and to get the job done, you know? So I think there's a couple of different ways of looking at it, you know, and again, it's about understanding what that means to different people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, I think we're going to have a great conversation about this today. And I think it's so important understanding people on what they need. And maybe with that in mind, Helena, I might turn to you next and ask you, look, you lead a large EMEA team. What has that experience been like for you over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I could certainly relate to a lot of what Emer was sharing there. I think thinking back, those first few weeks were really strange. I think we all left the office and we thought we'd be back in a few short weeks. And Satya Nadella, our CEO, he speaks very eloquently about care being the new currency. And I think that really became a guiding principle for managers and indeed for our team. It meant, you know, having empathy with the people you work with, not just our team, but our clients as well. So those first few weeks were really just seeking to understand how everyone was feeling, checking in, encouraging everyone to leverage the supports that we had available, like our employee assistance program that was already in place. And then we had new programs like the COVID pandemic leave that was introduced very quickly, and really encouraging people to ask for support and take advantages of the programs that were available to them. I'm sure, like everyone on this call, we did our fair share of cahoots as well to create that team engagement across the team. So while Emer was suffering from cahoot envy, I think some of us were at the other extreme. But those team moments and creating those moments of connection were just so important. We also had the benefit of the Microsoft Ireland Centre team moving many of our office experiences online pretty quickly. So those exercise classes that Emer mentioned, like yoga and Pilates and sports I hadn't even heard of. They all went online very, very quickly. And that really helped people, because you might remember at that time, we couldn't go more than 5 kilometers from our home. And we all suddenly found out what 5 kilometers really was. So that time was crucial internally in terms of thinking through how we could enable the team and support the team in everything that we had available at that moment in time, and what else new we could create to help that period of time to really help people make that transition to fully remote. We also had the added dimension of being a customer facing team. So we were checking in on our clients and to make sure they knew we were available to them and that we could help wherever they needed. And I think after the first few weeks, we realized this was just going to be more serious and more long running than we had initially thought. We had to pause and listen to what our team needed and try and get that balance right. And we had to make sure that all those team connection moments just didn't become overwhelming. You know, daily check-ins can be overwhelming if you're doing it every day. So we stopped and listened and you know, made changes to ensure that we figured out what that new normal could look like. We also had a challenge around our clients. You know, in the advertising world, you're working with clients from many different industries, from retail to finance to, yes, of course, you guessed it, to travel. So we had two sides of that spectrum: clients that were growing, that were flourishing, and then clients that were going through some really, really difficult times where their staff were on furlough or were going on what we could call in Ireland our PUP payments, pandemic payments, for those that were suddenly out of work. Businesses were worried about keeping their lights on. So our team took that accountability really seriously and really leaned in to understand how we could support, what insights we could provide, how we could really help them during that time. And sometimes it was just listening and being there for them was really, really important. So we collectively took that care piece on, and I think that's the one consistent that has remained throughout these past 20 months, not just for managers but for each and everyone on the team. Just being there for each other was really important, you know.
Yeah, look, I think we can't underestimate the importance of that care piece, and I think, you know, as you rightly point out, Helena, it's care. It's care for your team, care for the people you work with, care for the people you work for, care for your suppliers and for your customers. And I suppose recognizing that their situations and circumstances are changing and evolving all at that time. So really maintaining that focus on care and empathy, I think it's just so critical in the hybrid workplace where we don't know what we don't know, right?
Absolutely. Look, we laughed together, we cried together, we celebrated together, and we did it all completely remotely. And everyone was just in a very different place at different stages through that last 20 months.
Yeah, look, it's so true, Helena. Liana, I'm maybe going to turn to you because I know, similar to myself and Emer, you've also had that shared experience of, I suppose, reflecting on your career and your next role during the pandemic. But I'm maybe going to shift the question a little bit and sort of say to you, can you talk to me a little bit about how a growth mindset approach really influenced you, not only in making the change, but in recognizing that it was time to change?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so and Emer alluded to this earlier, but growth mindset is one of those phrases that we use a lot in Microsoft, and honestly could easily be dismissed as just another corporate jargon, except that it is truly one of the most transformational phrases that you can use. So either by applying it to your life or just to your career. So what it means is that it's all about accepting that you as a person, you're always growing and you're always learning new things, and you don't need to prove that you know it all. So I've really tried to kind of take this growth mindset on board into my own career development, as you said, Tracy, and having that growth mindset encouraged me to always seek new challenges and find ways to grow and improve myself. And when you can be in a space like in Microsoft where everyone is learning and growing and improving, it makes a huge difference to how you see the world and especially your career path. And during the COVID pandemic, while I was working on my previous team, which was the Azure Crisis Communications team, I found myself consciously looking at my career through that growth mindset lens. I analyzed what I was doing and started to realize that there are so many other cool things that I can be experiencing next and things that I can be learning next. And through a lot of that reflection, because that I had more time for because we were all working from home, there wasn't that much to do overall with it, other than kind of working and thinking, reflecting. I was able to kind of start asking the question of what is that next thing that I want to get involved with that I can learn and experience next. And I chose to move into cybersecurity because it was the area that I just gravitated the most towards in my Azure Crisis role. And then I started looking around and I found that there were just so many opportunities for this at Microsoft, which was amazing. So I found the perfect open position. I applied, I interviewed, and I got it. So I've been working on this cloud cybersecurity team now for since April of last year, and I've been loving it. There has just been so much learning every day. There's always a new challenge, and because of the growth mindset, I can really feel that I'm ready and capable to meet it. And learning new things comes with being uncomfortable, because I don't always have the answer to everything straight away. So I have to go and I have to figure it out. So I had to essentially get comfortable with being uncomfortable, as that saying goes, which I think is a really important skill to learn because technology in general will continue to evolve at a really rapid pace. And the need for learning new skills, well, that will play a huge role in future as it does now. So you're always going to be learning new things. And that is a good thing because learning is necessary for growing and developing as a person as well. And in my opinion, somebody will never get old if they're learning and developing themselves and their skills. And in Microsoft, we're really lucky because we all get to do this, always be learning, as well as helping to shape that technology for future generations.
Yeah, look, I think, gosh, you've thrown quite a bit at me there, Liana. But what really resonates for me is I can absolutely say the whole get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think is key. And look, as I said, I've moved roles recently. You moved roles last year. I think, you know, you have to be okay with being, you know, at times deeply uncomfortable with what you don't know. But I think it's about being open to learning and accepting you don't have to know it all. And usually in a new role, I would also say you're not hired because of what you know. You're hired because of your skills, your competencies, your capabilities. But
It's
in
all part
terms
of
of the,
it's
yeah,
all part of the process when you're switching, when you're learning. It's all, it's okay to feel like that. Everyone does it.
it is. I think one of the talks that we heard from Satya was he talked about being a learn-it-all, not being a know-it-all, which I thought was a very good phrase. I actually brought that one home to my kids, but I'm not sure they've absorbed it. But you know what, that going back to the get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I do believe that that is a muscle we're all going to have to build in the hybrid workplace, because it's full of unknowns, and it's not like there's a blueprint out there that says this is hybrid work now and this is what we're in. I think we're on a journey, and it will continue to evolve, and I think we're all going to have to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And actually, that journey we're all talking about here today a little bit is leaning towards, I suppose, career and career development and growing our own careers, and roles and learnings. Emer, I might turn to you as one of our fellow job movers in the last in the last year, taking the learnings from your own journey. Um, what do you think, you know, I suppose, how do you think that career development and our approach generically to career development will need to evolve in the hybrid work environment?
Yeah, good question. And I really resonate so much with what Leanna talked about there. I think you said something like you don't need to prove that you know it all. And in the last 6 months, I've moved to manage a new team in an organization within Microsoft that I wasn't overly familiar with in terms of, like the core priorities, to focus on a part of the business that I'm also not familiar with. So everything was new. So I really needed that, get comfortable being uncomfortable mindset. And it still feels very uncomfortable, 6 months later, to be honest. But I think prior to the pandemic, for me, searching for new opportunities always involved chatting to a lot of people, bumping into people in the coffee dock, letting people know you were looking for opportunities, finding out what's happening across the business. So it was always that kind of face-to-face, I suppose, thinking and interaction, and it would often lead then to the more kind of formal one-to-ones or informationals. But it was a different kettle of fish doing it fully remote. What I've learned is you need to be really purposeful and actually plan your career discussions really well. Who are you going to talk to? When are you going to do it? What are you going to tell them? What are you going to ask them? And really have it planned out. Because I set a goal to have a career discussion every week through that time period, and didn't meet it every single week, but I had lots of discussions. So you really need to plan it out. Don't leave it to chance, because we don't have those opportunities anymore, bumping into people. I think the other piece of it for me, which I will always carry forward, right, no matter, if it's face-to-face or remote, is preparation and reflection is really key. Prepare well for every discussion. I kind of learned this the hard way back when I spoke to my manager about the fact that I wanted to start the ball rolling and looking for what's next. She connected me with somebody for a career discussion, a person I knew quite well, actually, and I wasn't prepared for it. So I probably rocked up to that discussion with the mindset of, you're having a kind of a quick chat with somebody. She asked me questions that in my mind I could answer, but I wasn't able to articulate very well. Aspirations, transferable skills, what I liked doing, what I didn't like doing, all of the usual stuff that you kind of think but when you try to explain it to somebody, it doesn't come out right. So look, I took the positive from that. I never went into any of my career discussions over the following few months unprepared. Now, people did ask me questions that made me kind of, reflect upon what I thought I wanted, but what came out of the end of, and then I would go back to my plan and tweak it, and become a little bit more clear, in terms of what I wanted. So it was about an 8 to 10 month process. And what I got from the end of it was like nearly a bucket list, like a set of criteria, a list of things I wanted, a list of experiences and things I wanted to get from my next role. So when people were talking to me about opportunities, it was easier to say yes or no, or and understand what you wanted to consider. So that they were the learnings in doing a remote. Now I know as we go forward into hybrid working, there's this sense of half and half. We don't really know how much face-to-face time we'll have, but there's definitely a few things to consider from a career development perspective that I will take forward. And I think the first one is that self-reflection piece of it, right? So we know the research has showed us that job postings on LinkedIn, remote job postings on LinkedIn increased 5 times, more than 5 times during the pandemic. So hybrid working is definitely the future. I mean, as the world opened up, we're kind of more and more employees. We've read loads about it, the great reshuffle, lots of people are evaluating their next move. And I think it's obvious now that flexibility is here to stay for many companies, not all, but for many. I mean, at Microsoft, where most people can work from home 50% of the time without approval, as an example, right? So what I would say is really sit down and think about the new opportunities that flexible working brings to you in your life, how it can enable your desired lifestyle, and get clear on different companies' policies and experiences that that will help you achieve those goals. I think the second thing is be prepared. I learned the hard way. Like, talent is everywhere in the hybrid world. So in essence, you have more competition, but you also have more opportunity, right? So be purposeful and prepared when you're going into all of your career discussions, and be clear in terms of what you want to talk about. And then the third piece for me kind of centers around empathy. I think as leaders, we definitely need to empathize with people and their unique needs, and understand as well our own preferences, and that they might not necessarily be the preferences of the people around us, the people on our teams or our colleagues that we're working with. Yeah, so they'd be my 3 things to bring forward: self-reflection, be prepared, and have empathy.
Thanks, Emer. And you know that you tell that story so beautifully of not being prepared in the first event. I think we've all been there, but I think you're spot on in terms of really think about what you want. And I also like that emphasis on empathy. But I think what really resonates as you talk, and actually talking to all of you today, is that I think career development and learning can actually thrive in the virtual environment. And I feel very positive about it. Even though I know it can feel daunting sometimes for people when they feel like they're balancing a lot, I do believe we should be optimistic about the hybrid work environment and what it holds. But I think, Emer, you touched on it a little bit, hybrid workplace, we don't quite know what we don't know, right? And flexibility means different things to different people. And we're going to have to evolve to figure that out together. So maybe, Helena, with that in mind, can I ask, what do you think are, if you look back on the learnings from this virtual work environment we found ourselves in, what do you think we now need to really harness and take forward into the hybrid workplace? What, from your perspective as a leader?
Yeah, I think probably one of the key learnings is that we need to support our teams to fulfill their career ambitions, and to attract and retain great talent. So I think what Emer just talked about there about career development will continue to be super, super important. And then obviously when you land that new role, the onboarding experiences I think is so crucial for employee enjoyment and satisfaction. I always think of that beautiful Maya Angelou quote. It goes something like, people will forget what you said, or people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think with that onboarding experience, that starts the moment someone accepts a role. Managers reaching out, peer mentors introducing themselves over LinkedIn or email, letting that new person know that they're excited to have them join and are available to them if they need anything. And I think those are just key moments in that new hire journey, to reassure them that they made the right choice. For our team, we had, of course, our structured online program that we're actually continuing to evolve and to improve as we get more and more feedback, as people go through that experience. But we really had to be deliberate in supporting in the connection piece, you know, more than anything else, because that feeling of inclusion is just so important when you move company or you move roles even within a company. And of course, I would also say the fun part of what we do has been really prominent in the last 20 months, and is really important as we look forward, you know, creating those social connections, and taking time to do that. You know, it's not just a little add-on, it's core to you know, creating an environment where people love coming to work. You know, we still want people to love coming to work. So whether you dress up for a Halloween event or you do gingerbread houses or cookies or Secret Santa or whatever, those elements are so important, and we've learned that, and we continue to, you know, look at how we can improve what we do in that space, because it's not easy becoming part of a new team without, you know, making those connections happen. And I think as we look forward and hopefully getting to a place where we get to truly get to hybrid working, we will evolve further again and learn from what's, you know, what we've done to date. We know that from the data collected that close to 70% of people say they want flexibility. And at the same time, 70% of people want that human connection so that they can collaborate. I think it's like something like 50% of people say they want to come into work so they can have focus time. And then another 50% of people want to stay at home so that they can have focus time. So therein lies that hybrid paradox. And I know Microsoft has been really quick to publish hybrid guidelines to really empower managers and teams to figure out what that means. Emer alluded to it earlier, you know, that 50% of being able to work from home by default. You know, you can work maybe even more from home, but at a minimum, you can work for 50% from home without any permission, any approvals. And I guess the way we're working with that is that we're working with our teams on what are our team agreements. You know, what do we collectively want to do to ensure that when we go back into the office or we're working at home, that we have a shared experience that's inclusive of all. So really taking the time to develop those team agreements, to listen to each other, to learn what's important, and to enable the team to shape that with you, is critical. I think the other thing as I look forward that's going to be really important is the use of technology, utilizing tools, like for us, it's Microsoft Viva and Microsoft Teams that have really helped us, and new meeting experiences. They're just becoming more and more important. And we really have to ensure that those inclusive experiences exist so that those who aren't in on a particular day feel truly included in how we operate. I think it's a trend we're just certainly hearing from other companies as well. You might have seen, Tracy, that the recent Digital Ireland Inclusive Recovery report that came out, where hybrid working was actually called out by tech leaders as a key driver of the adoption of digital technologies. I think nearly 70% agreed that they will have a hybrid workforce in the future, as more staff work from home more of the time. But interestingly, the scary thing is that 43% believe they remain behind the curve when it comes to having those right digital experiences and technologies in place to deal with those new working realities. But I think that's going to be really critical for everyone.
Yeah, look, for sure, Helena. You know, I think technology is an enabler. Look, I say it as almost like a feeling like a person of privilege, because I'm deeply embedded working in a technology company. So I have the technology at my fingertips. You know, I use Microsoft Viva. I was a little skeptical at the beginning, but I'm actively using Microsoft Viva now, which tells me on a daily, weekly basis where I haven't got enough one-to-ones with my team set up, where I'm spending too much time doing something, where I'm not spending enough focus time, and it's helping me to steer, I suppose, even, you know, and carve out my time in a more efficient manner, and be thoughtful about it. But, you know, beyond, you know, my experience at Microsoft, or our experience at Microsoft, I think it's very true to say, look, technology is an enabler, but it requires an investment, and that investment is in terms of the technology itself, but also upskilling and ensuring people have the right skills and can leverage the technology in the right way, so that we can all move forward together as a society, right? And really live out that successful hybrid work environment. And Helena, you know, that investment is not to be underestimated. I know we have some programs to support this, and there are many programs out there across the tech industry, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely, Tracy. There's a number of programs that we have, and I know other companies are doing the same. It's really important that people are comfortable with technology, and we're trying to play our part in the recovery by supporting those thinking of a career in tech. We have a great program called Step into Tech. It's a new digital skills training program done in partnership with FIT, and we're hoping this will equip 10,000 people with the digital skills required to transfer to emerging and in-demand roles within the digital economy. It looks at supporting people who have perhaps left school or college, or maybe somebody that's mid-career and interested in developing their digital skills. And that's just one program. There's so many, and I think taking advantage of those opportunities are really important.
Yeah, look, I know my own digital sales organization, we have the Digital Sales Academy as well, right? Where we can recruit people who are not, would not typically have that digital sales training up front, and help and support upskilling them in that regard. And you know what, a good reminder of how amazing the technology is in bringing us all together as people. We've got over 300 people on the call today, connecting and chatting. And actually, one comment has struck me. We have Lisa online today, with her 2-month-old sleeping on her chest, that actually warms my heart, because I can remember being on maternity leave 18 years ago and feeling quite isolated from work and the work environment. So another lovely example, I think, of how technology is a force for good and connecting us a little bit. But look, as I listen
can I just in there for a second? Sorry, and just going back to, as I was listening to Helena talking about some of the things that were involved and that we do, right? And I'm thinking about in the context of forward-looking hybrid working.
Yeah.
It's just struck me that it's really important, I think, to have these other things within your remit that you're involved in, if you have the time, whether it's getting involved in the Step into Tech or getting involved in some of the mentoring, Tracy, that we've been doing, with students, or whatever it may be. I think as you move forward into the hybrid world, and we're all focused on what that's going to look like and how am I going to cope with that, and what does my organizational leadership think, and what are we going to be? I would say to people, try to have something else. Try to use your role and the company you work for as a platform for doing something else, because it gives you that sense of purpose. It gives you that other focus when we're moving into a period of time that's actually so unknown. I know we've had 2 years of this unknown back and forth, but we kind of know that this is the next phase. This hybrid working is forever, probably. So I just wanted to because I just reflected on that, in terms of the things that can help us as we move forward.
I think so, Emer, and we talk about the hybrid paradox. People want flexibility, but they also want human connection. I think we're going to have to think about, how do you get that human connection? And actually, I see we've lots of questions in the chat window, or when it's coming through my chat window via the emails. So I might kind of go to some of those questions, and actually what you just talked about there, Emer, I think is a really nice segue into the first question about making that connection. And it's in regards to, I suppose, how the value of external networking, and probably how do you approach it in a hybrid environment. And I know we're all actively involved in external networking here on this panel, but I might actually turn to you, Leanna, because I know of all the great work you do in CWIT. So I'll let you maybe answer that question. So the value of external networking and how to approach it in a hybrid environment.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. So CWIT, and just a reminder for everyone, CWIT is a women's network that stands for Connecting Women in Technology, and it's in the technology sector in Dublin. And I participated in CWIT on a part-time volunteer basis while also being in Microsoft. So Microsoft supported this. And honestly, the participation in CWIT is one example that led to so much engagement for me with the broader community in Dublin. and I got very involved with it. So like I mentioned earlier, I lead the early careers pillar, and in the last 2 years, even though we were virtual, we were able to run several programs, a few that we started actually during COVID, virtually. The University Tech Starter was an example of that, and the University Tech Starter actually started before COVID, so when we were able to have it in person. And what we used to do is we used to go into a few universities and have panel discussions and share again our experiences and our learnings in our careers, so we can encourage the next generation to join careers in technology. And then we were able to switch over to having that be virtual, which was amazing because instead of just the one university, we were able to target all the universities and all the colleges, and that was brilliant. And then some other programs as well. We also have programs that are, I suppose, more internal to the CWIT companies, which are focused around networking. So, like, we've got the CWIT Books and Culture, which where we discussed a different book every 2 months, and we just get our shared experience. We have quite a nice tight-knit community in that one, so that's been great. And then also the CWIT Fireside Chat, which is a kind of a spotlight on one woman every month sharing her career journey and her career experiences, so that we can all learn from each other. And same as what Emer said, having those weekly calls with people about her career, kind of along the same lines. So this altogether, all of these programs and being part of CWIT really helped me to engage with the external community in a very meaningful way, because I got to help other people progress through their careers through that networking piece, but also encourage the female students to start and join tech careers as well. So yeah, it's also been monumental for connecting me with other like-minded people in Microsoft, like Tracy and Emer. I both met through CWIT as well, so that's been just brilliant. So yeah, it's actually, like I said at the start, it's really great that Microsoft and companies like Microsoft do give their employees the time and space to join these kind of programs. And like Emer just called out before, I think joining this kind of thing is really important for someone's just for themselves, because you can sometimes just be stuck kind of doing your work, but it's nice to engage with the broader community and to sort of look past yourself and your goals, and to have these shared experiences with people that you wouldn't normally have. So yeah, that's kind of what I say about CWIT.
I'll say two things, Juliana, as you answer that question. The energy that exudes out of you when you talk about your engagement with CWIT is infectious. And I know from when you and I chat about CWIT that it's also, I think, that sense that, look, you're connecting with other people outside of your organization. I think it's about people connection, but getting new perspectives, diverse perspectives, sharing best practices, sharing ideas, making connections. It's all so critical, I think, in that hybrid environment.
Tracy, I think sometimes we think of networking as a dirty word, but it's not. And, sometimes networking is simply just to get to know somebody else from outside your circle. Like that lady joining us today with a baby, she's probably not going to want to work with any of us for a little while, but just getting to know somebody else, and hearing somebody else and talking to somebody different to ourselves for even a few moments in a day or a week. It's so powerful and uplifting.
Yeah,
for sure.
And one way that I actually, especially when I was younger, the way I used to think of networking was it's not networking in that dirty sense of the word. It's more just making friends. It's making friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agree.
Absolutely. And so with that sense of making connections, making friends, I'm actually going to maybe move us to another question. And because we have spoken a lot today about our shared experiences as hiring managers, moving roles. There's a question here. For the panelists who have transitioned during roles during the pandemic, or who are managers with employees who have transitioned, have they developed any best practices for how to transition or onboard virtual employees? And what are some of the lessons learned during those experiences? I think that's a really great question. And I might turn to you first in the context of the hiring manager experience and learnings, Helena.
I think the most successful people that I've seen on board have been very focused on getting to know the team first. So they've made the effort to, and it doesn't have to be this big arduous task. Just saying, I'm putting 15 minutes in your calendar. I'd love to grab a coffee break with you and just get to know what you do and how you work and learn a little bit. And that starts off a relationship, and that relationship develops. And they've done that within their team. They've done that outside their team, and they do that in partnership with their manager. Like, they ask, who should I talk to? And the manager will give them a list of names. And it's really, the person does that. And I've never yet met somebody in Microsoft that has said no to a coffee chat. A lot easier when you were in the office because you bought the coffee, but over the phone it's cheap and it's easy, and it has that is where I've seen people have the most success, because it's easier to engage in team chats online, to contribute. People will actually go, didn't you work in another company where you did something like that? Do you have an opinion on that? And they get brought into the conversation. So I think for me, what I've certainly seen in my team, those that are really, really successful spend the time doing that. And you never get a second chance to have those first 2 weeks in a row. Make those first 2 weeks count and make as many connections as you possibly can, because it's just so powerful, and it also makes the role a lot more fun.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of support. I have definitely found on my journey, there's a lot of support for, I think you're right, it's about people and connections first and foremost, but there is a lot of support for that. I think in my own experience, I've had great support from my manager in terms of, helping me, develop a really robust onboarding plan so that I'm clear on who those stakeholders are that I actually need to make connections with. That I have a buddy on the team who's gone before me in this journey and who has the right level of experience to make sure that I'm having the right conversations about, what I don't know, and I've got a safe place to go to talk about the aspects of the job that I maybe don't understand, that I may be trying to wrap my head around, because there are the practical elements, I think, as well. Of that onboarding. And I found that mentoring or buddy system really key. Emer, what do you think?
So I think all of that is so important, that real keeping close to people. I think as a manager, hiring people into the team when we're all remote, you kind of have to have them always at the forefront of your mind in those first few weeks, right? So at the moment I'm transitioning somebody and he's relocating to Ireland with his family, and he's, in the old world, he would come into the office, the whole team would be there, he would be, taken real good care of, brought around to a tour of the building and all of that sort of stuff. And you can turn around and ask a question, listen, what does this mean? And what does this mean? So all of that's gone. So I think for me, it's like top priority in those first few weeks. Helping that person navigate through the organization, navigate through the team he's in or he or she are in, and having a really structured onboarding plan, right? It's not only about learning the business, it's about giving them the space to ask those questions that if they were in the office, it would take 30 seconds to get an answer on. If they're sitting at home and they're trying to navigate, it might take 3 hours, right? So it's just, you have to think about it in a different way.
Yeah, definitely leverage the technology and feel comfortable making those connections frequently. I think definitely from personal experience as well, I know my own organization in digital sales, and I know across the company, regardless of what organization you're in, there's really solid learning and content onboarding training plans. Some of it's self-paced, some of it's virtual classroom, but there's a lot of content and support out there. And then I think more broadly, right, when you're joining externally from Microsoft, we, through our HR function, there is a super onboarding experience in terms of helping you to navigate beyond the immediate team that you're onboarding to, but to understand the Microsoft culture, the organization, our clubs, our societies, our employee resource groups, and sort of helping people make those connections to find, well, what is it you're passionate about, and where are you going to find your, your connections at a company level as well. I think there are good supports there.
And I would say find your community. Like if you're a manager and you're worried about this, and if you're somebody who's transitioning yourselves, I'd say find your community. I mean, for me, we've set up over that since the pandemic hit. The manager community in Microsoft has gone from strength to strength in terms of the community building, and I think Helena, Tracy, like you can probably allude to that. So having that community of support where you can ask questions and say, this is my scenario, with your teams chat and on those bi-weekly calls with the 300 other people managers, you get to actually share notes and find out best practice, because we have to all remember we are all in this together. Everybody has the same challenges. Everybody is on this journey, right? So it's about sharing those experiences so you can figure out which works best for you and what's been working for other people.
Yeah, I think for sure, Emer. And I'm going to try and squeeze in one very last question, and a very quick question. And I think it'd be remiss not to. There's a question there about work-life balance, and I suppose the challenge of defining and setting clear boundaries between personal and work life. Would anyone like to answer that today, and in terms of some tips and how they've approached it? Because I think it is a reality of hybrid work, right? Or virtual working. Leanne, I see you nodding.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this was something that I did struggle with, especially not only since the pandemic, since the lockdown and working remotely, but also when I first started in my career, because I felt that I had to, work a lot to show that I was dedicated and I was there, and that did mean that sometimes I was working later in the evenings, and I learned through the support of my manager as well. I learned not to have to do that. We have the hours that we're set to work. We don't always have to work extra. Like that's not a given. And I learned over the years, and then while when we went remote as well, to just set those expectations and set those boundaries that I'm not going to take calls at 7 p.m. I know we often work with our headquarters, which they're outside of Seattle, and then with other parts of the world, and everyone works at different hours. But we can try to make it so that everyone works at least roughly within our own working hours. And people have been really, really understanding of that. And it's been something that now, if anybody, now I don't even need to say it. So if there's a new person that I'm working with, and they accidentally put something in that was like 8 p.m. my time, somebody else told them that actually this is not a good time for Liana's work hours. So that was really great. And just it's just all about setting those boundaries so people don't expect you to work, and you can choose if you wanted to on certain days. If you can have that choice. It's all about the choice that when you can work. It's all about that flexibility as well. So that's been mine.
That's definitely the word today, isn't it? Flexibility. I'm thinking words like flexibility, empowerment, agility. But listen, I'm looking at the clock ticking away here in front of me. I could talk to you ladies for hours. I'm going to wrap by saying thank you, Emer, Helena, and Liana, for joining me today, and for being really honest and authentic in sharing your thoughts and your stories with our audience. I've really enjoyed it. To our audience, we're going to share the recording. I know we have a lot of questions we didn't get to. We are going to reply to your questions. And I am going to steal the words of another and say thank you very much for joining us. And now I will leave the last word today with Liana, Helena, and Emer. One sentence on what you will bring forward into the hybrid workplace. I'll start with you, Liana.
Okay, never stop learning.
Excellent. Helena, on the spot.
Never assume you're doing right by your team. Stop and ask them and really listen to their answers and keep them informed of what you do with their feedback.
Brilliant. And finally, Emer, the last word.
I would say be purposeful and planful with time and with your career planning.
Thank you. Listen, I have really enjoyed the conversation. I hope everyone who joined us today got something out of this session. I hope you feel you've made some connections and you've been part of a network today. Connect with us. Do take care. Stay safe. And we hope you'll join us for our next event next quarter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.